While there's no way to prove if karma is a real thing or not, the fact that so many people ultimately get what they deserve is undeniable. Sometimes it's a good deed getting rewarded, while other times a wicked act comes back to bite the perpetrator in the behind. Here now are some amazing stories from both sides of the aisle. 10 true tales of karma, both good and bad. It's part of a doctor's basic job description to do all they can to help a patient get better, but it's still possible to go above and beyond the call of duty. In this story, that extra bit of commitment ultimately kept both patient and doctor alive. In June 1986, a baby boy named Chris Trokey came into the world 10 weeks early. Obviously, he wasn't doing too well in the beginning, and the 3-pound Trokey wound up spending much of his time in the hospital. His physician, Dr. Michael Shannon, was especially dedicated to keeping the little child alive, at one point staying with him for 2 days straight while a high fever threatened his young life. That kind of care wound up saving Trokey, who grew into a man and became an accomplished paramedic. Fast forward 25 years to 2011, Dr. Shannon was driving down the highway and got into a terrible accident. His car caught on fire and he was stuck inside. EMTs arrived with the jaws of life to get him out, and they immediately rushed Shannon to a nearby hospital. One of the paramedics recognized Shannon's name because that paramedic was Chris Trokey, whom Shannon had helped save decades back. What's more, the hospital that Dr. Shannon was rushed to, it was the same hospital where he saved Trokey's life all those years ago. Several years later, Trokey became a father, and there was no doubt in his mind who would treat the tyke. Michael Shannon was baby Trokey's physician, just as he had been to his father when he needed him most. Many of us don't think twice about keeping money we find on the streets, but it might be worth it to return the dough because the reward might just be greater than anything you could possibly imagine. In September 2013, a homeless man named Glenn James was walking around a strip mall in downtown Boston when he came across a backpack with no owner nearby. Inspecting the bag, he found over $40,000 in cold hard cash, along with some traveler's checks. For a man with no home or money, the temptation to keep everything must have been massive, but James instead decided to do the right thing, turning the backpack over to local police. Since whoever lost the backpack also left behind their passport, it was easy to identify who the treasure belonged to. The police were so impressed by James' actions they honored him at a civil ceremony shortly after. But that wasn't all. The story went viral and reached the eyes and ears of a man in Virginia named Ethan Whittington. Touched, Whittington started a GoFundMe to help James out of his homeless situation. That page also went viral, ultimately raising almost $150,000 for the man. It was completely unexpected and also completely deserving. So next time you find something that isn't yours, don't keep it. You too may be rewarded hundreds of thousands of times over. Few things are more satisfying than a terrorist getting what's coming to them, in however manner that happens. That's exactly what happened in Russia back in 2010, when a plot to commit mass murder was foiled thanks to a cell phone company jumping the gun. On New Year's Eve in 2010, a woman known as the Black Widow was part of a conspiracy to murder thousands, just days after killing dozens at a Moscow airport. The plan involved her blowing herself up, taking thousands of innocent people with her. The bomb strapped to her body would go off around midnight, triggered by a text message her accomplices would send to her phone. The suicide bomber got half her wish. The bomb went off and she did indeed die. But she took nobody with her because karma had other plans. As she and her partners were readying the evening's plans, the widow received the one thing she didn't want: a text message. Her phone carrier had sent her an automated Happy New Year text several hours early, and that minor error wound up saving thousands of lives. The text triggered the bomb, blowing the widow to smithereens and sending her partner scurrying off in a panic. It's unknown if her partners were ever caught, but it's known that they didn't try their luck with another mass murder plot. That's about as happy an ending as one can hope for. Here's a story that might be the best example of crime doesn't pay I've ever heard. In 2017, 4 people went out to eat at Denny's. Finished with their meal, they returned to their vehicle and were rudely interrupted by a man with a gun demanding they fork over their cash. While most people would just hand over the money to make the gunman leave, these friends were not most people. They fought back and prevailed, thanks to a combination of quick thinking and an incredible comedy of errors. They hit the gas and reversed at high speed, with the gunman realizing he was in big trouble. He ran for his car, except they had already bolted, realizing their plan was a colossal failure. The abandoned robber soon found himself walloped by his would-be victim's car, which would have been bad enough, but as luck would have it, he was still holding his gun, and the shock of being run over caused him to pull the trigger. As luck would further have it, he was unknowingly aiming the gun at himself and shot himself in the head. Somehow, the failed robber survived, not that he got away with anything. The entire incident was caught on camera, and one of the passengers had darted off to call the police the second she realized they were being robbed. At the end of the day, that criminal had no money, no friends, and no freedom. He really should have just stayed in bed. Even non-criminals will tell you you shouldn't go after the same place twice. A couple of Seattle thieves somehow forgot that rule, paying dearly for doing so. In March 2018, three thieves tried to make off with over $2,000 of Costco merchandise. They made it to the rear door and might have gotten away with their crime had it not been for a meddling security officer who recognized one of them. See, this guard had seen the man in question rob that same Costco before and knew he wasn't returning a second time as an honest shopper. He called the cops and explained the situation, correctly surmising that the robbers would attempt to escape through the back exit again. That way, the cops knew exactly where to meet their newfound friends. Sure enough, after grabbing all they could carry, the robbers tried to sneak out the back. To their shock, they were met with a barrage of cops wearing body cameras. Knowing they were cooked, they gave up the goods and themselves immediately. Not every criminal is a master supervillain, but these jokers didn't even come close. Some people trade Pokemon cards, others old family recipes. Here's a story of two families who traded body organs, saving lives and forging lifelong friendships in the process. In 2004, a young man named Kalen Millard crashed his ATV and died. His parents, Bill and Tish, felt it best to donate their late son's organs to those in need. One of those organs, his pancreas, went to a man named Jake McKinnon, a lifelong diabetic whose own pancreas was rapidly shutting down. His thankful mom, Janice, discovered who had saved her son's life and became friends with the Millards as a result. Fast forward 10 years and diabetes struck again. This time, Bill Millard was facing kidney failure as a result of his diabetic issues. He needed a new organ, and luckily for him, he got one in short order. That kidney came from none other than Janice McKinnon, the mother of the man whose own life was saved because Bill decided his son should be helping others live from beyond the grave. It was a favor returned on a previously unheard of scale, but one all parties were certainly glad transpired. They say being kind is its own reward, but sometimes it begets an even bigger reward. In 2015, two firefighters from New Jersey went to a diner after spending the previous night helping fight a large warehouse fire. They ordered their breakfast and coffee but never received the check. That's because their waitress, a young woman named Liz Woodward, heard of their deed and decided to pay for their breakfast as a thank you for their service. That act of kindness prompted one of the firefighters to go on Facebook and give her a major shout out. He instructed anyone reading to tip Woodward big if she ever served them, which would have been a nice gesture in and of itself. But the karma gods had other grander plans. That same firefighter came across Woodward's GoFundMe page, which she had set up to raise money for her father. He was wheelchair bound and needed $17,000 for a special chair-accessible van. Thanks to this firefighter putting the word out, over 1,700 people wound up donating to her cause. All in all, what began as a $17,000 goal raised over $86,000, more than enough to buy a completely customizable van for her father. Paying for someone's coffee was never more rewarding. It's possible to be too much of a boss, such as in the following story. In the winter of 2014, a woman named Ava Linz was working the register at her local 7-Eleven when a homeless man entered the store. Linz felt bad for the man, stuck outside on a cold winter night, so she let the man have a free cup of coffee to help him warm up. Lynn's boss came in and accused the man of stealing coffee, to which Lynn replied by claiming he had paid. She later told her boss the truth and paid for the drink herself, a gesture her boss rewarded her with by unscheduling her, clearly intending to fire her completely. Whatever strength this manager felt by letting someone go over a $1 cup of joe that disappeared shortly thereafter. That's because after Lynn wrote about what happened on Facebook, her story went viral and resulted in hundreds of companies reaching out to hire her. Just one day after 7-Eleven let her go, she took a job as an administrative assistant, and for the most apropos of companies, she wound up working for Citizens for Adequate Housing, a group dedicated to helping people like the homeless man Lynn gifted with hot coffee. As for Lynn's old manager, he couldn't have handled the situation worse. At first, he told the news he was thinking of firing her, then when public outrage came his way, he backpedaled with statements like, "I don't have any problem. I told her it's okay. Everyone forget it, it's okay." He also told her she could come back to the store, but by then she was on to bigger and better things. Who knows where the future will take her, except for any place but 7-Eleven. Drivers who cut other drivers off rarely make friends, but here's a story of someone who made an enemy for the worst possible driver, a cop. In February 2018, a group of cars was waiting to merge onto a busy Pennsylvania highway. One of the drivers had grown incredibly impatient, honking his horn and yelling at the people in front of him to move, despite that being impossible. But rather than just blow off steam like most angry drivers, this one decided to cut in front of everyone, driving on the shoulder of the highway with the goal of hitting the highway quick as can be. That was obviously rude and dangerous, but it was also pretty stupid. That's because the driver of an SUV in front of the merging line wound up being an undercover cop extremely intent on doing his job. He switched on his lights and sirens and immediately pulled over the aggressive driver. Adding insult to injury was the driver directly behind the cop. Delighted that the irritating horn honker had gotten his, he cried out, "Instant karma, mother effer!" That might not be the kind of instant karma John Lennon had in mind, but it's satisfying all the same. Not every act of karma involving money requires tens of thousands of dollars to be special. Here we see a mere $20 gesture bringing an entire community together. In 2015, a Texas mosque found itself vandalized by anti-Muslim extremists. While mosque boardsman Faisal Naeem was given a news interview about the incident, a 7-year-old boy named Jack arrived with his mom. Jack had heard about the attack and wanted to help somehow. Jack decided to donate everything in his piggy bank, money he had been saving up for a new iPad, to the mosque. Jack's contribution was around $20, which technically wasn't much. Symbolically, however, it meant the world to Naeem, who explained to Metro, "Coming from Jack collecting his pennies, it's worth $20 million to me and our community." This was especially true considering Jack and his family are not Muslims, as according to Naeem. "This gives me hope because this means it's not one versus the other." A human rights lawyer named Arsalan Iftikhar heard the story and was so moved he felt like he had to thank the boy somehow. Through the power of social media, he got in contact with Jack's mom, who told him what Jack had been planning with that money. So Iftikhar decided to use his own money to buy Jack the iPad he wanted. It was the happiest of endings, and proof that even small acts of kindness can invite large karmic rewards.